Hello. Hoping it's working. I pushed go and then it said internet wasn't working. So fingers crossed. All is okay. Say hello if you're there. Today's day 2 journey. So as I explained yesterday, this was going to be about the who, what, where, how, when, or whys. But yesterday we covered the who's and the what's already. So I thought I'll go into like the whens and hows kind of now. So jump on if you're there, leave a comment below. Let me just see if I can see comments on my screen. Sometimes they come up on my computer, but they don't actually come up on my phone. So I'll just jump over here. It's nice to get away from the kids, actually. I told hubby I need an hour. So I'm chilling out in my room for the last half an hour. Internet is being slow. So the main thing I wanted to talk about today was adding context to our genealogy. So we've already kind of worked out who we're looking for, what we're looking for, and maybe we've done some searches and we've got a little bit of information. Maybe that information's come from our parents or our grandparents, or maybe it's research that you've done. So let me just make that bigger. Okay. To add in context, so that could look like what it is they did for a job, or criminal history, or maybe they were in the war, or immigration. So you've got a little bit of information about something. To delve deeper into that, there's so many different resources that you can go to, obviously. But my first point of call, especially here in Australia, is to jump into the newspapers. If an ancestor has done something that is noteworthy, it's usually newsworthy. So hopping onto Trove, which is the, I want to say National Archives, I'm not sure now, I've just had a mental blank, the National Library of Australia. That's their website. They have 1 million newspapers and it's all digitalized. So you literally jump on. I think I've done a few lives in here about Trove before. Just jump in there, type something in the search box, and it will come up with newspapers, dates, articles, things with that person. Well, you hope they do. So newspapers, I guess the main things were births, marriages, and deaths. They're in there. So the obituaries, the marriage notice. Back in the day, people liked to tell the community what was happening, and that was one way of letting people know. So and so got engaged, and so it would be popped into the newspaper, or so and so's coming of age party, which is usually their 21st birthday, or 18th, depending on where you are. So that would be popped into the newspaper. Say hello if you're there. I can see somebody's there. So if it was newsworthy, if it was noteworthy, it's newsworthy. So birth, deaths, and marriages. Criminal stuff. So a lot of the time we'll come across a desertion notice, which is someone's gone, they've deserted their wife. So they've just up and left her to her own means. You weren't allowed to do that. Whereas now, if you up and left your wife, you're not a criminal for doing that. So that would be popped in the newspaper that so-and-so has deserted their wife, and please keep an eye out for him, the warrant for arrest. So that would be in there. Anything around the war, usually around the war times, if you looked in the newspaper, there would be millions of articles about what was happening, who just gone overseas, who's just come back from overseas, who passed, what's going on. So thinking in generally as well, what was going on in society and in the community at that time, and thinking about other questions you might have about your ancestor. So things like entertainment, for instance. If you had an ancestor who was a musician or they were into theatre, that usually would be popped in to the newspaper somehow, some way. There'd probably be an article. I've come across one of my clients had an ancestor who was into boxing. That's in there. He was defeated, unfortunately. But there's an article about what was going on, because it was a big event. People would they would travel like a long way just to go and see a horse race or a boxing match or whatever it was. That was their entertainment. And so they would travel for sometimes even for days. They would travel days to go to these events. Not like now, I just jump in the car and half an hour I'm at something that's entertainment. Entertainment's in my home. So things were very different back then. So we've got to think, you really got to expand the way that you think about community and what it was like back then to what it is now. Anything like an accident. So one of my client's ancestors, this is what I've just been researching the last couple of days. He actually passed away. He fell from a tree whilst he was at work, and the tree hit him, broke his neck, and so that was all in the newspapers. His wife actually then sued the company he was working for because he was supposedly at work, but then there was a bit of a, was he actually at work or was he just at a friend's place? So, being that it's community, back then the communities were a lot smaller, so people that we worked for were our friends. So that's another thing to think of as well. So anything like any accidents that's a public knowledge, public interest. I've got an ancestor who had an accident with a train. He parked over the train lines, and the cart went off. Luckily, he got out just in time. So that's in the newspapers. School attendance. If you didn't send your kids to school, you were fined. So that was in the newspapers. So newspapers are definitely a major help. So that's my number one. I go to the newspapers. That's my first point of call. After that, we're probably looking more at books. So if you're, say your ancestor's railway employee, you can go look for a book about railway employees, or jump online these days. Jump online and Google railway employees and type in the years. So it'll give you more of a history on what was happening in those times in that occupation. Maybe not railway employees, maybe they worked in a carpet factory. So go look up carpet factories, and you can even, like, I've got an ancestor who was a cooper, and you can sometimes even nail it down to which brewery he was working at, because there was only 3 in the country at the time. So I was able to nail it down to the one that was closest to his home, because obviously he wasn't going to be traveling too far to get to work. So looking at books, encyclopedias. Danica, one of my lovely clients at the moment, her great grandpa, can't remember how many greats, he's in the encyclopedia. He came to Australia just by default. He told them that he was into making wine, that he was a winemaker, and that he'd be a great help over in Australia. So they shipped him over to Australia to make wine for 3 years, and it turned out he lied. He was not a winemaker, although he was very successful in the end. So he obviously skilled up whilst on the job and learnt the hard way. But that's in the encyclopedia, and that's a very well-known story. So to find that, it's Australian royalty right there. And he's a Frenchman, and French is not easily come by either. So that was like striking gold when we found that. Other places you can look are street directories, phone directories, depending on what country and what time of history you're in. I know my husband's family in Germany. You can look in the phone directory and find all of his ancestors in there, and their phone number at the time. So then, obviously, you want to nail it down to which one is which. So then you need to do research around other things, like where they actually lived and what they did for jobs. So, what else? I've just got a bunch of notes. I'm just making sure I'm covering everything. So I've covered newspapers, covered books and directories. And then obviously the further you go back, the less information you're going to find as well. So it might just come up like, he was a labourer. Okay. He was a labourer. There's not, sometimes you might not be able to find much else about an ancestor than that. I've got plenty of ancestors that were labourers, or contractors was another big one. Contractor was usually like the head of the game, and then the labourers worked for the contractor. But that's it. Like, unless they did something noteworthy, or they, I've got one ancestor, he worked in a sawmill, and he was there at that one company for over 50 years, I think it was. So there was a newspaper article about that because he'd been there for so long. So I was able to find out. But if I just looked at his census records, it just said labourer or miller. It didn't give us much more information. So that can happen. But sometimes, like I said, sometimes you might just have a labourer, and then you might not be able to find out anything else about what they actually did. So you're adding context, you're adding a narrative, you're creating or recreating their story by going through history and finding all this information. So it's not just who they were, when they got married, etc. So you want to be adding more context, more history. So looking at those things that person in particular did, but also looking at their surroundings and things that are happening in society at the time. So like I said earlier, when the war was happening, there was a lot of things going on about the war. So how would that affect that person and that person's family? The depression, the plague, like there's so many different things that have happened, and big events. If we're narrowing it down to Australia, it's like colonization. So, how is that affecting the little people, the people that weren't, they weren't the top of the game, so they're just the little workers. How was it affecting them? Their home, and everything's changing. The houses are being built up around them. Factories are being putting in. There's lots of things. So like I said, there's so many different things. So you need to look at who it is that you're looking at. What year were they born, and what year did they die? So, what year were they in their prime? So if you're looking at, say, 20 to 50 years old, like, what era was that, and what was happening in that place? And you can look at the country as a whole. You can look at the town as a whole, or even narrowing it down to that specific little town or village or whatever it is that you want to call it. What was going on around that person? Another thing I just skipped over, which I just realised, was immigration. So coming to Australia, what was it like on the boat? What boat did they come on? Who else was on the boat? Were they convicts? And as you're doing this, lots of more questions are going to come up as well. It's not just going to be, you're not just going to have one question and you're going to answer it. As you're doing it and you're finding more information, more questions are going to arise. Write those questions down, because you will forget. Write them down and then answer them. Go through your research and answer every single question that you've got. Sorry, no, it's gone dead. answer every question that you've got, because like they're just going to keep arising, and the more you have, the better the story, obviously. You know, you're creating a narrative. It's not just names and dates anymore. I think that's pretty much it, to be honest. Places like I said, you can go through to Trove. That's one of the places that I go. Newspapers.com also. Now, newspapers.com is mainly American newspapers, but they do have 2 in Australia. For last time I checked, it was only 2. I'll just do a quick check now. But newspapers.com for your newspapers. Look, you've got Google Books. You can go down to your local library. Look on your bookshelf. I know my bookshelf, I've got 3 shelves just full of Australian history books. I probably haven't picked up any of them, to be honest, because I literally just jump on the internet and look for what it is I'm looking for. I am a bit lazy when it comes to things like that. Let me just check World. So I do have Down the Rabbit Hole coming up, which is one of my new courses, which is about how to actually do the research. If you're unsure about how to use Trove or unsure about how to use newspapers.com, it's all going to be in this course. So I will let you know. But I am looking at the 11th of May, starting that. So in Australia, it is still only 2 newspapers. So you had the Age in Melbourne and the Sydney Morning Herald. So they're the only 2 newspapers. But I can look up things that happened in the 90s. So that's pretty damn cool. Lots of little bits and pieces. I found, I did one, I don't know if you guys saw it, what was it called? The Dynon case, which was the key that was found, out here in the Yarra Valley. There was a key that was found underground. Someone was excavating their property. They found this key. It was a 21st birthday key, and it had, I can't remember her name, I want to say Lorraine, but I don't think it was Lauren. I don't know, something Dynon. And it was a big case, you know, that was going on at the time. Well, you know, just in social media. But I thought I'll look into it, and I found one of her ancestors, and how I found her was by going into newspapers.com and typing in, and she came up born in 1973, I think it was. So I found her on Facebook. I sent her a message. I said, hey, were you born in 1973 at this address, or your parents so-and-so? You know, if so, I got some information about one of your distant relatives, had a key, etc. So that was very helpful. So even using things, like I said, social media, if you want to find things on family, that's another way. I found my family through social media, well, part of my family. I got back in contact with my grandmother and my mum's side, just by memory in the white pages. But then they had family that they didn't speak to, so I thought I'd go jump on Facebook and MySpace back then, and I did some searches, and I found my uncle, who I'm very close with now, and that was all through sending some messages on Facebook. It's very much like, you know, if you were doing your research back in the 70s and 80s, everyone was sending letters. It wasn't as easy as jumping on the internet and sending the copy paste, send them to 1 million people. But that's another way that you can find people that are living, obviously. But it's touch and go as well. So you're not guaranteed to find them. Finding living people is so much harder than finding dead people. That's why I stick to genealogy. But hello, miss. Being interrupted now. So Trove for your newspapers, Google Books, like I said, library, your newspaper, you're distracting me now. Your bookshelves, encyclopedias, just jump on Google. I should probably update it. I did the Game of Google genealogy, which was a video I did, which I then turned into an ebook, which I think is still for sale on my website. That was, Elsie, please don't jump on the bed because you're going to make Mummy's camera fall down. Thank you. And how to search in Google, because the way that most people search in Google is we just type something in. but there's tips and tricks on how to find exactly what it is you're looking for by using quotation marks, question marks, asterisks, those types of things. That's about it, really. Let me just double check my notes on the computer. Oh, journals and diaries, that type of thing. If grandma's got those in the back of the cupboard, grab them because they will have bits and pieces in them. One of Luke's ancestors, he travelled Australia doing sheep shearing, something like that. Sheep shearing, and he kept a diary of like what he found. So I was able to find out, pinpoint what station he was at what date, and what he was actually doing. He also was a budding photographer, so he'd take photos all the time. So I've got photos to go with that diary that go with what we know about him as well. So it all adds context. And another one of Luke's ancestors actually was Elsie, hop down, please. I forgot the name of it now. It's in like a society group. I can't remember what it's called. But so we've got a box, and it's got his stash in it, and it's got his pin in it, and it's got all this information. So jumping online or jumping in, going to the library or looking in a book or encyclopedia and looking up that society, when was it around? What did they have to do to be in that society? Why does the society not exist now? Like looking at the history of what it is that your ancestor was involved in as well. I see that someone's just jumped on, but I'm actually jumping off. That was the end of my little chat. So jump on, catch the replay, pop any questions you guys have got in the comments below, and I will let you guys know when Down the Rabbit Hole starts, which, like I said, probably the 11th of May. I'm gonna release it, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Mwah. Bye.